My name is Clara, I'm 32, and for most of my life, my world was the predictable, ordered rhythm of Boston. I worked in arts administration, a field that valued quiet competence, and my days unfolded in a palette of muted grays and orderly spreadsheets. My husband, Mark, was a financial analyst, a man who saw the world in columns of profit and loss. We had a life of comfortable predictability. Then, for months ago, a phone call in the middle of the night shattered that world. My parents, on a weekend trip to the Berkshires, were gone, their car lost to a rain-slicked road. The silence they left behind was vast and terrifying. When the will was read, that silence was filled with a confusion so profound it felt like a second bereavement. My brother, Leo, inherited our family's stately home in Chestnut Hill, a place filled with light, laughter, and a lifetime of curated memories. He also received the bulk of their liquid assets, a sum that would ensure his comfort for the rest of his life. The confusion and hurt were a physical ache in my chest. My parents, Samuel and Eleanor, had always been the sun and moon of our small family, their love seemingly cast in equal measure. Now, I held a document that suggested that love had been calculated, weighed, and found wanting on my side of the scale. Before I continue my story, I'd be so grateful if you'd let me know where you're watching from today. And if you find a piece of your own story in mine, please consider subscribing. It helps to know we're not alone on these winding paths. The day of the will reading is a watercolor blur in my memory, all soft edges and sorrow. I sat in the hushed, book-lined office of Mr. Finch, my parents' longtime attorney, the scent of old paper and leather a suffocating comfort. Leo sat beside me, a study in quiet composure. Our relationship, always a bit distant due to our differing natures, had become frosted over in the weeks since the accident, his brisk efficiency in handling the arrangements leaving no room for my fumbling grief. To my son, Leo Samuel Abbott, I bequeath our primary residence at 114 Evergreen Lane in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, along with all its contents and the sum of $500,000, Mr. Finch read, his voice a gentle cadence against the room's heavy silence. Leo gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if this were a foregone conclusion. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. To my daughter, Clara Eleanor Abbott, I bequeath our ancestral property at 33 Hearthstone Road in Crestfall Valley, Vermont, along with all its contents and the sum of $75,000. The air stilled. I looked from Mr. Finch's sympathetic face to Leo's unreadable one. That's everything? I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. Yes, Clara. That concludes the primary bequests, Mr. Finch confirmed, his gaze soft with a pity I didn't want. I turned to my brother, my voice barely a tremor. Leo? Did you know about this? Dad and Mom made their choices, Clara, he said, his eyes fixed on a leather-bound volume on the shelf behind Mr. Finch. It's not for us to question them. My mind struggled to make sense of the disparity. The Chestnut Hill house was a beautiful colonial revival, worth upwards of $3 million, a home our parents had lovingly filled with art and warmth. It was the backdrop to every childhood memory, every holiday, every triumph and tear. And now it was Leo's. I, on the other hand, had been given a property I'd seen only once on a family trip when I was 10. I remembered a stern, silver-gray saltbox house, slumped and tired, surrounded by a tangle of overgrown woods. The memory was faint, but the feeling it evoked was not, a sense of forgottenness of time having moved on and left it behind. My husband, Mark, attempted a clumsy sort of support when I returned to our pristine condo that evening. My composure shattered. There must be a mistake, a reason, he said, handing me a glass of Chardonnay I didn't want. Your parents weren't like that. What reason, Mark? I asked, my voice cracking. What possible reason is there to give Leo a life of ease and me, a ruin in the middle of nowhere? Dad always said he was proud of my career, my life. Mark's hand was a heavy weight on my shoulder. We have to fight this. Contest the will. It's an obvious injustice. But a quiet, Stubborn part of me resisted. These were my parents' last words on paper, their final act. As baffling as it was theirs. No, I said, the word tasting of ash. I won't turn their memory into a court battle. That was the beginning of the fissure between us. At first, Mark seemed to respect my decision, but his acceptance soon curdled into a constant, low-grade criticism. "You're really just going to let him have it all?" he'd ask, his frustration coloring our evenings. "Leo gets the multi-million-dollar house, and you get a pile of firewood with a mortgage." "It isn't about the money," I'd insist, though the sting of the imbalance was a constant thrum beneath my grief. "Of course it's about the money, Clara," he'd retort, his voice sharp with a pragmatism I used to admire. "The world runs on money. Your parents knew it. Leo certainly knows it. Why are you the only one who doesn't get it?" Leo, meanwhile, had retreated completely. My calls went unanswered, my texts met with silence. I drove past the Chestnut Hill house once and saw a luxury SUV in the driveway I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw Leo gesturing to a woman in a sharp suit, an interior designer perhaps. He looked perfectly at home, the new lord of the manor. I tried calling a few of my parents' close friends, hoping for a sliver of understanding, but was met with a gentle but firm wall of discomfort. The topic was clearly closed. A month after the reading, Mark's patience snapped. I came home from a long day at the museum to find him at our granite countertop, the inheritance papers spread out like an indictment. "I had a real estate agent in Vermont pull the comps for your ancestral property," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's assessed at $60,000. The land is too rocky for any real farming. It's literally, by definition, a liability." "It's not a liability," I defended, though my voice lacked conviction. "It meant something to my father. He loved Vermont. And he left it to you as a parting gift? A symbolic albatross? While St. Leo gets his trust fund topped up." The argument that followed was a brutal excavation of our marriage, unearthing years of resentments I hadn't known he harbored. He called me naive, a pushover, someone who let her family walk all over her. My refusal to fight for the inheritance was, in his eyes, the ultimate proof of my weakness. "I'm done, Clara," he finally said, his hands thrown up in surrender. "I can't watch you do this to yourself, to us. Pack a bag. Go to Vermont. Go see your precious pile of sticks. And don't even think about coming back until you've found some shred of self-respect and decided to fight for what you deserve." The silence that followed his words was absolute. "You're kicking me out?" I whispered. "I'm staging an intervention," he said, his face a mask of cold fury. "Maybe a good look at rock bottom will be the wake-up call you need." That night, I packed a small suitcase, each folded sweater absorbing a tear. I felt adrift, unmoored from every anchor in my life. First my parents, with their bewildering final act. Then my brother, with his chilling silence. And now Mark, pushing me out into the storm just when I needed the harbor of his arms the most. As I loaded my car in the pre-dawn quiet of the city, a flicker of something new, something other than grief, ignited within me. I would go to Vermont. Not for Mark, not to grow a backbone, but for me. I needed to understand. And maybe, just maybe, that tired old house held the key. The drive north was a slow unfurling of the map and my own tangled thoughts. The urban landscape of Boston bled into highways, then into the rolling green hills of Vermont. I listened to my father's old folk music CDs, the familiar melodies a comforting balm on my raw emotions. With every mile, I felt the city's grip loosen, replaced by the quiet dignity of mountains and sky. My GPS guided me off the main road, onto a winding country lane, and finally onto a gravel path barely deserving of the name road. When the synthesized voice announced, "You have arrived," I cut the engine and just stared. The house stood against a backdrop of fiery autumn foliage, a proud, wounded soldier. It was a classic salt box, its silvered clapboard the color of a stormy sea. The roof of the porch sagged like a weary sigh, and several windows were dark with plywood. A nearby sugar house, where maple syrup was once made, listed to one side, its roof a patchwork of rust and moss. Wild asters and goldenrod grew in a riotous, untamed garden. "Oh, Dad," I whispered to the empty car. "What did you leave me?" With a deep breath, I stepped out, the crunch of gravel the only sound. The front door groaned in protest, but opened into a space that smelled of dust, damp, and the ghosts of forgotten years. Motes of dust danced in the sunbeams, slanting through the grimy window panes. The furniture was sparse, colonial-era reproductions covered in faded drop cloths. A stone fireplace, vast and cold, dominated the main room. The kitchen was a time capsule from the 1950s, with a pale yellow refrigerator and a stove that looked like it belonged in a museum. I sank onto a creaking kitchen chair, the full weight of my abandonment pressing down on me. My parents were gone. My brother was a stranger. My husband had cast me out. And I was here in a house that felt as broken as I did. A gentle knock on the door made me jump. I opened it to find an older man with a face as weathered and kind as the landscape around him. He held a woven basket. "Saw a car come up the drive," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "You must be Clara, Samuel's daughter." "Yes," I said, surprised he knew my name. "Hello." "Elias Vance," he said, offering a calloused hand. "Your nearest neighbor, though near is a flexible term in these parts." He nodded toward a curl of smoke rising from a chimney on a distant hill. "My father? You knew him?" Elias nodded. "Sam came up every month or so, just to sit with the place. He didn't say much, but we'd share a thermos of coffee on this porch now and then." This was a revelation. "He visited? Regularly?" "He never said a word to us." "A man's got to have a place for the quiet parts of himself," Elias said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your father had his reasons, I reckon." "Not my business to guess some." He passed me the basket. "Figured you might need some essentials. The general store is a good long drive." After he left, his words echoed in the dusty air. My father had a secret life here, a regular pilgrimage to this forgotten house. Why? With no bed to speak of, I laid blankets from my car on the wide plank floor of the living room. As darkness fell, the house settled around me with a symphony of creaks and groans. They were lonely sounds, but they were company. Before sleep finally took me, I made a promise to myself. Tomorrow, I would stop mourning what I had lost and start trying to understand what I had been given. The next morning, fortified by Elias's homemade apple bread and a fierce new resolve, I began to explore. The ground floor held the main living area, the kitchen, a small, chilly bathroom, and a room that might have been a dining room. Upstairs, there were 3 small bedrooms and another bathroom with a clawfoot tub stained with rust. As I stood in the narrow upstairs hallway, a sense of spatial dissonance pricked at me. The length of the hall didn't seem to match the exterior dimensions of the house. Something was missing. I ran my hands along the paneled wall at the end of the corridor, my fingers tracing the lines in the wood. Behind a faded tapestry depicting a pastoral scene, I felt it, the subtle, almost invisible outline of a door. There was no knob, no hinge, only the faintest seam. I was stumped until I remembered the book I'd packed, my father's treasured, dog-eared copy of Thoreau's Walden. It had been on his nightstand for as long as I could remember. On a hunch, I retrieved it from my suitcase. Taped to the inside back cover was a small, ornate brass key. Tucked beside it was a slip of paper with my father's familiar, elegant script, for when you're ready to find your own Walden. My hands shook as I inserted the key into a tiny, camouflaged keyhole in the wall paneling. With a soft click, the doors swung inward, revealing a room that stole my breath. In stark contrast to the rest of the house, this space was perfectly preserved. It was a scholar's sanctuary. A large maple desk stood against one wall, its surface clear save for a single, thick envelope. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaned with leather-bound volumes on philosophy, botany, and history. A comfortable armchair was angled toward the window, which framed a perfect, breathtaking view of the valley. This was my father's heart, hidden away in this house of ghosts. The envelope on the desk bore my name. With trembling fingers, I broke the wax seal. "My dearest Clara," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I am gone and you have found your way to the heart of Hearthstone. I know you must be confused and hurt by the terms of the will. Please believe me when I say that what seems like a slight is, in fact, my greatest act of faith in you. This house, this land, holds a value far beyond what can be measured in dollars, a value I could only entrust to you." Tears blurred the words. He had known how I would feel. He had understood. "This property has been in our family since it was built in 1788 by your great-great-great-grandfather, a cabinet maker named Silas Abbott. What you see as neglect, I see as authenticity waiting for a gentle hand. But its value is more than just sentimental. Behind the portrait of your grandmother in this room, you will find a safe. The combination is the date of your birth." I looked up and saw it, a portrait of a woman with my mother's eyes, rendered in soft oils. I lifted it carefully from its hook to reveal a small, black wall safe. I spun the dial to my birthday, and the heavy door clicked open. Inside was a worn leather portfolio filled with deeds, letters, and photographs. On top lay a smaller envelope marked "The First Thread." I spread the contents across the desk, a wave of reverence washing over me. The photographs showed the house in its prime, a proud homestead with a flourishing orchard and a well-tended garden. In one, a man with my father's quiet intensity stood on the porch, his hand resting on the shoulder of a young boy, my grandfather. The documents were a treasure trove, the original 18th century deed, letters from Silas Abbott discussing his craft, and newspaper clippings. One, from an 1852 edition of a local paper, described the house as a frequent gathering place for thinkers and artists of the Transcendentalist movement. The First Thread envelope contained a simple, cryptic note in my father's hand, "Where the syrup flows from Heartwood." On the back was a small, hand-drawn map of the property, with an X marking a spot inside the dilapidated sugar house. The rest of the day was a pilgrimage, following the trail my father had laid for me. Each clue was a communion with him, a lesson in seeing the world through his eyes. In the sugar house, tucked into a hollowed-out beam, I found a metal box containing Silas Abbott's journals and the next clue. This led me to a loose stone in the foundation of the house, which concealed a waterproof cylinder holding architectural sketches. But they weren't historical sketches, they were my father's. Page after page detailed his vision for restoring the property, the house as a museum of early American craftsmanship, the sugar house as a working exhibit, the land as a conservation trust dedicated to preserving native plant species. It was a complete, thoughtful, and passionate plan for a living legacy. As dusk settled over the valley, I found myself in the root cellar, my phone's flashlight beam dancing over the cool stone walls. The final clue for the day had led me here, to a series of faint carvings in the stone. They were symbols, I realized, not letters. According to a note I'd found, they were markers used by early abolitionists, suggesting the cellar had served as a safe haven on the Underground Railroad. My phone buzzed, startling me out of the 19th century. It was Mark, his name flashing on the screen with an unwelcome glare. "So," he began, without any preamble, "have you had your little rustic adventure? Ready to call a lawyer?" "Mark, this place, it's not what we thought," I said, my voice filled with an excitement I couldn't contain. Dad left a kind of trail for me. "This house is a historical treasure." He had this incredible plan for it. "Historical treasures don't pay the bills, Clara," he sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "While you're playing Nancy Drew in a barn, Leo is probably liquidating some of Mom's antiques for a down payment on a Porsche." His cynicism was a splash of cold water, but it didn't extinguish the flame that had been lit inside me. "You don't get it. This was never about the money." "It's always about the money," he said, the words a familiar, weary refrain. "And until you understand that, you're going to keep getting left behind." After we hung up, I sat on the cold cellar steps, the hurt of his words mingling with a strange, burgeoning sense of purpose. Mark saw only ledgers and bottom lines. My father had entrusted me with a story, a legacy woven from wood, stone, and principle. He believed I was the one who could read it. The next morning, I drove to the general store in the nearby town of Havenwood. The woman behind the counter, whose name tag read Dottie, looked at me over her spectacles. "You've got Samuel Abbott's eyes," she said. "You must be Clara." When I nodded, her face broke into a warm smile. "Your father was a lovely man. A quiet soul. He'd always bring me a jar of his favorite Boston pickles when he came up. All day, I met people who knew him. The man at the hardware store who sold him specialty wood oils for an old project. The librarian who had helped him research the history of the Abbott homestead. Each conversation added a brushstroke to a portrait of my father I had never fully seen, a man deeply, privately committed to this piece of land and its history. Back at the house, I followed the next clue to a locked sea chest in the attic. Inside, I found them, my father's journals, 2 decades of his quiet thoughts. I read for hours, my heart aching with love and regret. The journals chronicled his growing passion for preserving the property and, more painfully, his growing rift with Leo over its future. Leo visited today, read an entry from 3 years ago. He came with a proposal from some developer. Wants to buy up the whole valley. He called Hearthstone a wasted asset. I tried to explain that not all assets are liquid. I tried to explain that this land holds our history, our soul. He just doesn't see it. I fear he never will. Clara would understand. I closed the journal, the leather cool against my skin. The truth was beginning to settle in my bones. My father hadn't chosen Leo over me. He had chosen me for this. He had seen a shared value system I hadn't even recognized in myself. He had trusted me. That night, I sat in my father's hidden study, the room filled with the scent of old books and his quiet presence. "I'm beginning to understand, Dad," I whispered into the stillness. "But why the secrecy? Why couldn't you just tell me?" The answer, I knew, was still buried somewhere on this land, waiting for me to find it. And tomorrow I would keep digging. The discoveries on my 5th day in Crestfall Valley were the ones that shifted the ground beneath my feet, both literally and figuratively. A clue about the Earth's hidden light led me to an old well, long since capped with a heavy stone. With Elias's help and a crowbar, we managed to move it. Suspended inside on a rope was a waterproof lockbox. Within it, I found a thick, professionally bound report, geological survey and mineralogical assessment, Abbott Property, 33, Hearthstone Road. The technical jargon was dense, but the conclusion was starkly clear. The land, my land, sat atop a significant deposit of exceptionally pure quartz, a type highly prized for use in advanced optics and electronics. A valuation report estimated the mineral rights alone could be worth upwards of $5 million. Stapled to the back was a formal offer letter from a company called Apex Holdings, dated 8 months prior, offering my father $7.5 million for the property and all associated rights. Scrawled across the offer in my father's red pen were 3 words: "Some things are not for sale." I sank to the grass beside the well, the papers trembling in my hands. The worthless property was a gold mine. The ultimate irony. But why the elaborate games? An envelope at the bottom of the box held the answer. "Clara," my father had written. "This is the heaviest secret this land holds." I kept this from everyone because I knew what Leo would do with this knowledge. The fortune beneath the soil can only be accessed by destroying everything on its surface. The house, Silas's legacy, the history, the delicate ecosystem of this valley, it would all be sacrificed at the altar of profit. I am entrusting you not with wealth, but with a choice. I trust you to make the right one. My father hadn't gifted Leo the valuable property. He had protected the truly valuable property from Leo by giving it to me. As if my thoughts had summoned him, my phone rang. It was Mr. Finch. Clara, I'm so glad I reached you, he said, his voice taut with an urgency I hadn't heard before. Per your father's instructions, now that a week has passed since you took possession of the property, there are matters we must discuss. I was to wait until you had a chance to acclimate. May I come see you? The next morning, Mr. Finch's sensible sedan crunched up the gravel driveway. He carried a heavy briefcase and an expression of deep gravity. Your father was a remarkable strategist, Clara, he said as we sat at the dusty kitchen table. He wanted you to fall in love with the place for what it was, not what it was worth, before you learned the whole truth. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. The whole truth is this. Your brother, Leo, has known about the quartz deposit for 3 years. He's been working with Apex Holdings, acting as their local liaison to acquire not just this parcel, but the entire valley. The air left my lungs. Leo knew? He's been working against Dad. Your father found out by accident. Leo was pressuring him relentlessly to sell, framing it as being in your father's best interest. When Samuel refused, Leo took the unforgivable step of petitioning to have your father declared mentally incompetent to manage his affairs. The betrayal was a physical blow. While I had been nursing my hurt feelings about being the less-loved child, my brother had been actively trying to strip our father of his autonomy for a payday. There's one more thing, Mr. Finch said, a faint smile touching his lips. He handed me an official-looking document. Your father's final move. 6 months ago, he successfully petitioned to have the entire 80-acre property designated a state historical landmark. The designation carries stringent protections. It explicitly prohibits any mining, excavation, or development that would alter the historical or environmental character of the site. He paused, letting the words sink in. It was his checkmate. And Leo has no idea. Just as Mr. Finch was leaving, my phone rang. It was Leo. Clara. How's the old place? He asked, his voice breezy and casual, a tone he hadn't used with me in years. It's surprising, Leo, I said, my own voice calm and level. I'm learning a lot about Dad. And about our family. Listen, I had an idea, he said, the false sincerity thick in his voice. I know that place is a wreck and a huge burden. I happen to know a developer who's been looking at land in that valley. I could put you in touch, handle the whole thing. You just have to sign. What developer would that be? I asked, my heart pounding a slow, steady rhythm. Oh, just a company. Apex Holdings. They'd probably give you $150,000 for it, clear. Which, frankly, is a steal for you. I almost laughed. A pittance, a fraction of what they had offered Dad, a lie to get me to sign away a fortune. That's very thoughtful of you, Leo. But I think I'll hang on to it. The manufactured warmth in his voice evaporated. Don't be an idiot, Clara. The place is a money pit. The roof is probably about to collapse. Take the offer. It won't be on the table forever. Why are you so invested in me selling this money pit? I asked quietly. A beat of telling silence. I'm just trying to look out for my sister, he finally ground out. But if you want to sit there and rot with your sentimentality, be my guest. The line went dead. I immediately called Mr. Finch. I need every piece of correspondence you have between my father, my brother, and Apex Holdings. And I need a crash course on the legal teeth of this historical landmark designation. That evening, I sat at the great maple desk in my father's study, surrounded by a constellation of documents. A timeline of deceit and foresight began to emerge. 3 years ago, Apex identifies the quartz. 2.5 years ago, Leo partners with them. 2 years ago, Leo begins pressuring our father. 1 year ago, Dad begins the landmark application. The will wasn't just a distribution of assets, it was a fortress, and he had handed me the key. I was poring over a survey map when headlights cut across the dark woods. A sleek, black SUV, utterly alien in this landscape, pulled up to the house. 2 men in expensive suits emerged. Clara Abbott, the older man asked when I opened the door, a barrier of oak between us. His smile was polished to a high sheen. I'm Robert Carlyle, CEO of Apex Holdings. This is our counsel, Mr. Graves. We were in the area and heard you'd taken over the property. Your brother suggested we stop by. Of course he had. Their arrival was a calculated move, meant to intimidate. It's late for a business call, gentlemen. We believe in efficiency, Carlyle said, his smile unwavering. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for this land. Given its condition, we feel $200,000 is more than fair. The offer had already gone up from Leo's lowball. They were testing me. Thank you for the offer, I said, my voice firmer than I expected it to be. But the property is not for sale. Mr. Graves stepped forward. Miss Abbott, your father was a sentimentalist who stood in the way of progress. We were hoping you'd be more pragmatic. Our final offer is $250,000. Take it or leave it. Their condescension, their blatant manipulation, it didn't cow me. It fueled me. Gentlemen, as I said, I'm not interested in selling my family's ancestral home. Especially not now that it's a protected state historical landmark. The shift in their expressions was deeply satisfying. Carlyle's smile vanished. Mr. Graves looked as if he'd swallowed a lemon. A what? A state historical landmark, I repeated, savoring the words. Designated 6 months ago. Any development, and particularly mining, is strictly forbidden. I'm sure your legal team can look it up. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's been a very long day. As I closed the door on their stunned faces, a thrill, sharp and clean, shot through me. I had powerful adversaries. My own brother was one of them. But for the first time since my parents' death, I felt powerful, too. I wasn't just grieving. I was standing guard. The morning after Apex's visit, I awoke to the sound of another expensive car struggling up the gravel drive. I looked out the window to see Mark's silver sports car, looking absurdly out of place. He emerged, dressed in weekend casual that probably cost more than my car, and surveyed the house with an expression of profound disgust. "You look like a castaway," were his first words as I opened the door. "It's good to see you too, Mark." "What are you doing here?" I asked, folding my arms. I was suddenly aware of the dirt under my fingernails and the wood smoke scent clinging to my clothes. He pushed past me, his nose wrinkling. "Leo called me. Said you were being irrational, turning down a massive offer on this place." "Did Leo mention the offer was from a mining company he's in bed with? Did he mention the land is sitting on millions of dollars worth of quartz? Did he mention it's a protected landmark?" I fired the questions like bullets. Mark stopped, his expression shifting from annoyance to avarice. "Quartz? Millions? What are you talking about?" I laid out the geological survey and the landmark certificate on the kitchen table. He read them, his eyes wide. The transformation was instantaneous. "Clara, this is incredible," he breathed. "We have to sell." "We can sell the mineral rights, keep the house if you're so attached to it." "We could buy a place on the Cape, travel. We'd be set for life." I just stared at him. It was a litmus test, and he had failed spectacularly. "That's it? That's what you take from this? Not that my brother lied to and betrayed our entire family? Not that my father trusted me to protect this place? Be realistic, for once," he pleaded, his voice rising. "Your father's gone. A house is a house. Land is land. Money is real. This isn't betrayal, it's just smart." "And what about the valley? The water table? The community? The history my father died trying to protect?" Mark threw his hands up in that gesture of ultimate frustration I knew so well. "This is why he left it to you. You're two of a kind. Sentimental dreamers. Leo's the one who gets how the world actually works." The argument that followed was a hollow echo of the one we'd had in Boston. But this time, his words didn't wound me. They simply clarified everything. I saw him and our life together with a sudden, painful clarity. We were two people reading from entirely different books. "I'm not selling, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "And I'm not going back to Boston. Not to our condo. Not to that life. You're choosing this wreck, over our marriage?" he asked, his disbelief genuine. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing my own values over a partnership where I'm only valued for my potential to be converted into cash. After he spun gravel driving away, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with conflict, but it was, for the first time, truly my own. That afternoon, I called Elias and asked for his help. Within days, his network had connected me with a small but formidable team. Isabel Rossi, a sharp, passionate preservation architect, walked the property with me, her eyes lighting up at the hand-hewn beams and original joinery. Your ancestor wasn't just a carpenter, he was an artist, she said. This house has a story to tell. Ben Carter, a young, tenacious environmental lawyer who had cut his teeth fighting logging companies, agreed to represent me pro bono until we could secure funding. Apex has deep pockets, but they hate bad press, he warned. Our best weapon is the story of this place. Through Elias, I met the members of the Crest Fall Valley Historical Society. They embraced my father's vision, sharing their own stories of the Abbott homestead and its place in the town's history. With their help, I began the arduous process of applying for historic preservation grants. My newfound purpose was met with an escalation from Leo. A formal letter from his lawyer arrived, accusing me of undue influence over our father and demanding a more equitable distribution of the estate. Then he began making inflated offers on the properties bordering mine, trying to box me in. The ugliest move was a petition to the court, challenging our father's soundness of mind when he signed the will, painting him as a paranoid old man lost in delusions. It's a Hail Mary, Ben assured me, but it will be expensive and ugly. I called Mr. Finch, my stomach in knots. Your father foresaw this, too, he said calmly. He recorded a video statement. I was to use it only as a last resort. The video arrived the next day. Seeing my father on screen lucid, eloquent, his eyes filled with a sad resolve, was both heartbreaking and empowering. He calmly detailed Leo's partnership with Apex, his attempts to have him declared incompetent, and his profound disappointment. Leo sees land and sees only its monetary value, he said, looking directly into the camera. Clara has always seen more. She sees the beauty, the history, the spirit of a place. The Hearthstone homestead is more than property, it is a principle. It is a 4-generation legacy of living with the land, not just on it. I am leaving it in the hands of the child who will honor that. Armed with my father's final testimony, I instructed Ben to fight back. We submitted the video to the court and sent copies to the State Historical Preservation Board. 2 weeks after Mark's departure, my small team gathered around the big table in the farmhouse kitchen. Spread before us were Isabel's preliminary sketches, Ben's legal strategy, and my father's journals. Apex and my brother want to make this about money and minerals, I said to the group. But my father knew it was about values. This house is a physical manifestation of a different way of thinking. That's the legacy we're fighting for. A plan took shape. We would restore the house, creating the Hearthstone Legacy Foundation to oversee it as a center for historical preservation and sustainable land use. We would leverage the story to build a coalition of community support that Apex couldn't buy or bully. As the others left that night, Elias stayed behind. He looked at me, his weathered face serious. Your father told me once, he said, that you were the one with the deep roots, even if you didn't know it yet. He'd be mighty proud to see you now, Clara. Mighty proud. That night, for the first time, I sat in my father's chair, in his hidden study, and felt not his absence, but his unwavering presence. I get it now, Dad, I whispered to the quiet room. And I won't let you down. The house began its slow transformation, breathing again under the care of loving hands. Isabel connected me with local artisans who specialized in historical restoration. Many, upon hearing the story, offered their services at a fraction of their usual rates. A stonemason whose great-grandfather had helped build the central chimney repaired it with a reverence that was palpable. A woodworker, using traditional tools, began the painstaking process of restoring Silas Abbott's intricate carvings around the doorways. We peeled back layers of wallpaper to find original, hand-painted stenciling. We pulled up 1950s linoleum to reveal the glorious, wide-plank maple floors beneath. Each discovery felt like a gift from the past, meticulously documented by Isabel to bolster our landmark's standing. The $75,000 from my inheritance disappeared quickly into foundational repairs and a new roof, but it was a start. Ben helped me officially establish the Hearthstone Legacy Foundation, opening the door to grant applications. The Historical Society organized bake sales and fundraising drives. Our story began to ripple through the valley. The local Crest Fall Chronicle ran a front-page article. A regional magazine, Vermont Life, sent a photographer and writer who were captivated by the project. The publicity was a double-edged sword. It brought donations and volunteers, including a group of architecture students from the University of Vermont who helped us document the property. But it also hardened the opposition. Apex launched a counter-campaign, running ads about the jobs and tax revenue their mine would create. Signs began to appear on the fences of some neighbors Leo had successfully bought out: progress, not preservation, and my kids can't eat history. The pressure was immense, but the work was my anchor. I learned to plaster walls, to glaze windows, to identify native plants in the overgrown garden. The physical labor was grounding, connecting me to the land and the house in a way I never could have imagined. I was no longer an arts administrator from Boston. I was the caretaker of Hearthstone. Leo made one last, direct appeal. He appeared one afternoon, looking tired and drawn. "The place looks better," he conceded, walking the newly stabilized porch. "It's getting there," I said, wary. "Clara, this fight is tearing us apart," he said, trying for a tone of weary reason. "Let's find a middle ground. Apex is willing to go up to $5 million. Just for the mineral rights. You keep the house, the landmark status, all of it." It was the perfect temptation, the serpent's apple. $5 million would fund the foundation in perpetuity. But I looked out at the ancient maples, at the stream that ran through the property, and I heard my father's voice from his journal. The fortune beneath the soil can only be accessed by destroying everything on its surface. The mining process would poison the groundwater for the entire valley, Leo, I said quietly. You know it, and I know it. There is no middle ground here. His face hardened into a familiar mask of frustration. Dad filled your head with his pastoral nonsense. He was living in a fantasy. No, I said, standing up, my body feeling rooted to the porch my ancestors had built. I think for the first time, I'm living in reality. A reality that includes more than just a balance sheet. The answer is no, Leo. Not the house, not the land, not the rights. Fine, he snapped. Then I hope you enjoy your noble poverty. Apex isn't going anywhere. After he left, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I being a fool? Was I sacrificing a real, tangible good for an abstract principle? That night, I dreamed I was walking the property with my father. He wasn't speaking, just pointing to a rare lady slipper orchid, to the way the lichen grew on the north side of the trees, to the clear, cold water bubbling up from a spring. I woke up with my answer. I was not just protecting a house, I was protecting a world. 3 months into the restoration, I received the official separation papers from Mark. Reading the sterile legal language, I felt a pang of sadness for the life we'd planned, but no regret for the life I was choosing. The Clara he had married wouldn't have recognized the woman I was becoming. I signed the papers and sent them back, my address now officially 33, Hearthstone Road. My home. As autumn deepened, the house reclaimed its soul. Fresh paint, the color of cream, brightened its old bones. The windows, reglazed and sparkling, reflected the vibrant canopy of the Green Mountains. We hosted our first event, a Hearthstone Harvest Festival, inspired by stories from an elderly neighbor who remembered my grandfather hosting similar gatherings. Over 200 people came. They brought potluck dishes, old photographs, and an outpouring of support that felt like a shield. The festival was a turning point. It solidified our community support and caught the attention of a major preservation fund. In early winter, as the first snows dusted the valley, we received a grant for $350,000. It was enough to finish the primary restoration and begin developing our educational programs. A reporter, interviewing me for a follow-up story, asked what had driven me to fight so hard. I found myself paraphrasing my father. "Real value isn't always on the surface," I said. "Sometimes you have to be willing to dig a little deeper, not for minerals, but for meaning." Standing on the porch with Elias, watching the snow fall softly on the restored sugar house, I felt a sense of profound peace. "You know," he said, his breath pluming in the cold air, "your dad always said you were the strong one. Said you just hadn't found the right ground to plant yourself in yet." Looks like he was right. I never would have found it if I hadn't been pushed out of my old life, I admitted. Elias nodded sagely. "Sometimes," he said, "you have to get good and lost before you can find your way home." Looking at the proud old house, a beacon of warmth and light in the winter twilight, I knew I was finally home. The anniversary of my parents' death was a day of quiet reflection. I had planned a small memorial service at Hearthstone, a celebration of the legacy they were building, rather than just what they had lost. To my astonishment, Leo came. He arrived just before the other guests, parking his sleek German car next to Elias's dusty pickup truck. He looked tired and, for the first time, uncertain. "The place, it's really something," he said, his eyes taking in the warm glow of the windows and the sturdy, welcoming porch. "I barely recognize it. Would you like to see inside?" I offered, my voice even. He nodded, and I led him on a quiet tour. We walked through rooms that now hummed with a gentle, restored life. He touched the smooth, hand-planed wood of a doorway, his fingers tracing the work of our ancestor. He was silent until we reached my father's hidden study, now a small, beautiful library open to the community. "Dad never showed me this room," he said, his voice low. He ran a hand over the leather-bound books. "He never told me about the history, about his plans for the place." "Did you ever ask him about anything other than its sale price?" The question was soft, not an accusation, but it landed with the weight of truth. His shoulders slumped. "I thought I was the practical one," he said, looking at me, his eyes clouded with a confusion that mirrored my own from months ago. "I saw a decaying asset, a financial drain. I thought I was protecting the family's wealth." "This is the family's wealth, Leo," I said, gesturing to the room, to the house, to the view of the valley from the window. "This is the part you can't put in a bank." Before he could reply, the first guests began to arrive. The confrontation I had braced myself for never happened. Instead, Leo moved like a ghost through the service, a quiet observer. He listened as Elias told a funny story about my father's failed attempt to fix a stone wall. He watched as Dottie from the general store tearfully recounted my mother's kindness. He saw the genuine community that had wrapped itself around this house and my parents' memory. Afterward, as the last of the guests departed, leaving behind the scent of cider and wood smoke, Leo found me on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the valley in hues of rose and gold. "I went to see my lawyer last week," he said, not looking at me but at the mountains. "I've officially withdrawn from the Apex Partnership. The latest environmental reports they tried to bury were damning. I couldn't be a part of it, not after seeing this." I held my breath, stunned into silence. "What about the contracts? The money you've invested?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "It's going to cost me a lot, but..." I couldn't look at my own face in the mirror anymore. I couldn't stand being the person who would trade all this. He swept a hand out to encompass the valley for a hole in the ground. It wasn't an apology, not in the traditional sense, but it was something more profound. It was an admission. It was a beginning. Our relationship wouldn't be healed overnight, but the deep, frozen chasm between us had begun to thaw. More importantly, the greatest threat to Hearthstone was gone. With Leo's defection, Apex Holdings faced a united front of community opposition and damning legal evidence. Their permit applications were denied, and 6 months later, facing mounting legal fees and terrible publicity, they sold their land holdings in the valley to a state conservation trust at a staggering loss. The victory was quiet, but absolute. Mark made one final appearance in my life. The news of the Hearthstone Foundation's second, larger grant had made the Boston papers. He arrived, as he had before, unannounced. This time, he brought a ridiculously large bouquet of lilies and an expression of rehearsed humility. "I was wrong, Clara," he said, standing awkwardly in the restored entryway. "I never saw what you saw in this place. What you've built here is remarkable." A year ago, those words from him would have been the validation I craved. Now, they felt hollow. He was congratulating the result, not understanding the journey. He was applauding the success, not comprehending the values that had forged it. "Thank you, Mark," I said, and I meant it. But it was a thank you of dismissal. We want different things from life. We always did. I just didn't have the courage to see it before. Our divorce was finalized quietly and without rancor. He returned to his world of spreadsheets and acquisitions, and I remained in mine, a world of legacy and growth. The official opening of the Hearthstone Heritage Center was a sun-drenched day in early summer. University professors presented their research on my ancestors' surprisingly modern land use philosophies. Local schoolchildren took turns churning butter in the restored kitchen. The project was bringing a new kind of quiet, sustainable prosperity to the valley, one that nourished the community instead of extracting from it. On a perfect afternoon, much like the one on which I had first arrived, broken and lost, I sat on the porch and finally opened the last of my father's journals. It was a small, leather-bound book he had kept in the safe, and I had saved it, knowing somehow it held his final thoughts. The last entry, dated the week before the accident, brought tears to my eyes. "I visited Hearthstone today. The light was perfect. I fear this will be my last project, and I won't be the one to see it through. That will be Clara's task. She doesn't know it yet, but this place will be her crucible and her rebirth. Leo will see the will as an insult, a financial disparity he cannot comprehend. But Clara, my Clara, will eventually find the real inheritance. She has a strength she has never been asked to use, a heart that understands the value of things that have no price. This land does not need an investor, it needs a guardian. This inheritance is not a house. It is the gift of purpose. It is the chance for my daughter to discover the remarkable woman she was always meant to be." His words were a final, loving embrace across time. He had known me better than I knew myself. He hadn't rejected me, he had chosen me. He hadn't given me a burden, he had given me a compass. The old Saltbox house, once a symbol of my own perceived worthlessness, now stood as a testament to resilience, history, and love. It had been restored, and in the process, so had I. As the sun dipped behind the green mountains, casting long shadows across the lawn where generations of my family had walked, I felt my father's presence not as a memory, but as a quiet, steadying force. "I understand now, Dad," I whispered to the gentle breeze. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me before I learned to trust myself." Have you ever been given something that seemed like a burden at first, only to discover it was the greatest gift you could have received? Or found a strength inside yourself you never knew you had, simply because life demanded it of you? I would be so honored to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey from grief to purpose resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and perhaps share it with someone who needs a reminder that our greatest challenges often hold the key to our truest selves. Thank you for walking this path with me today. I wish you all the courage to find the hidden value in your own unexpected inheritances.